My best friend has feelings for me and thinks we've been dating for months. I had no idea and I'm not sure if I should tell him because he's the first guy I ever liked. Last year, I moved out of my parents' house and found a job at a hotel that was reopening after changing owners. In the beginning I wasn't socializing much because it's really hard to find friends here when everyone already knows everyone. I've also been pretty busy because I decided to buy a house. It needed a lot of work, but it definitely made this move feel very permanent. In May, this guy from my job named Eric and I started talking. I told him I was new and he invited me to a barbecue with his friends. I'm not great with new people but they made me feel welcome right from the start, and were all very nice. After that we just kept hanging out, mostly me and Eric, which I thought was because we were always working the same shifts and got out at the same time. Plus, we were the only two who weren't in a relationship or had kids, so it made sense in my head that we were alone a lot. I'd cook him dinner/lunch and he'd show me great hiking places, as well as help out a lot with the renovations on the house. I also started telling him about a breakup that kind of forced me to move out and start someplace new, like a fresh start. I always thought it sounded so cheesy when people talked about knowing a week into a friendship or relationship that it was going to be different, but that's the only way I can describe what it felt like. 3 weeks ago he called and asked if I wanted to have dinner on my next night off and also said just you and me. He seemed kind of weird and formal, but I assumed it was something else going on and just said yes, to which he responded it's a date then. I assumed he meant that as a joke. Why line? Because I have friends who have said that before. He picked a very fancy restaurant in another town that I'd never been to. He was such a gentleman all throughout, paid for my meal, and the conversation was never boring. He showed genuine interest when I talked, and was so excited when we had something in common. I drove him home afterwards, and he gave me a hug before telling me goodnight and saying he had a great time, and he'd like to do it again. We're usually not that formal with each other, and I've seen him act that way with his friends before, so I didn't think much of it. Though, there was an intensity to it that he never showed, but I thought I was just overthinking small interactions. Then, something strange happened. He started sending hearts in texts and would call me some pet names here and there, which is the first thing that stood out to me a lot. I was confused as to why he was doing this, and for some reason I figured he was just messing around to try to get a reaction out of me. I think I was just in denial about the whole thing, but it finally clicked when he grabbed my hand while we were out during his lunch break, and I was really caught by surprise, so the only thing I could do was play it cool and go along with it. Yesterday, he asked if we were still on for our movie night, just the two of us alone, so that means anything can happen. I just said yeah, but I was starting to panic. I grew up pretty conservative, so I never questioned my sexuality, but I wasn't rejecting any of his advances or telling him anything. In fact, looking back at it now, I've always been awkward when it comes to that stuff, and I never really made the first move with any of the girls I've dated. I've been thinking about him for the last few days and I've realized I really like him. He's never done anything to make me uncomfortable, quite the opposite actually, and that dinner was the best date I've ever been on. He's cute, definitely what I would have said is my type, but a guy version, and it feels different than any friendship I've ever had. I definitely haven't been acting super platonic with him either, and if I'm being honest, if he'd been a girl I also would have assumed that's where this was going. But he's not a girl, and that's the best part. My issue is that I don't know if I should tell him that I didn't realize we were dating. I don't think he has to know, and I really don't want him to feel embarrassed that he assumed or think that I'm using him to figure myself out, but I also don't want to lie. I genuinely want to see where this goes since he makes me really happy. My best friend has feelings for me and thinks we've been dating for months. I had no idea and I'm not sure if I should tell him because he's the first guy I ever liked. Part 2. I recently moved to a new town and I made a great friend named Eric, but I didn't realize that he thought we were dating. I had no idea and I wasn't even sure if I should tell him. Well, we went out to dinner and a movie, which he had planned, and I was very nervous. I was terrified that this was going to be a deal breaker for me since I've never dated a guy before, or had feelings for a guy. Eric came over and I think he instantly realized I was acting weird because he was very good at reading my body language, and I was tense as hell. He didn't say anything while he was helping me cook, but then when we sat down to eat he almost immediately asked what was up. I said, I really like you and I want to see where this goes, but I want you to know it's very new to me and I'm not sure you're cool with that. He asked what exactly was new to me, and I said I'd only dated girls before, which then led to a conversation where I couldn't avoid telling him that I didn't realize we were dating until that lunch. He actually got really quiet for a few seconds after that and I was scared he was upset, but then he just laughed. Basically, he thought I'd been flirting with him for quite some time. Looking back I probably was, just not intentionally, and all of his friends had been saying, he seems so into you, it's really obvious, he's probably just too shy to make the first move. He even mentioned some other stuff we or I had done that I gotta admit definitely doesn't sound platonic when he retells it, like me putting my hand on his thigh and stealing him away from the group to talk to just him. I can see why they thought that and ultimately they were right, I guess. He then admitted that the only reason he grabbed my hand during his lunch break was because he thought I was the one reaching out to grab his hand. I'm glad he thought that because if he hadn't held my hand, I wouldn't have realized I liked him. Or maybe I would catch on at some point, but that would definitely be further down the road, which means precious time would be wasted without officially being his. He said that when he asked me to dinner, it was a huge deal for him and his friends had tried to hype him up for a while. That's probably why I didn't realize that he was asking me out since he was super nervous. He actually admitted that he'd even been nervous to talk to me that first time we met since I looked kind of lumberjack. Why? His words, not mine, though the day we met I hadn't shaved in a while, so I don't doubt it. We might try to keep our relationship low-key at first and mostly tell his friends, and some of mine. I could ramble on about him and what we talked about for a long time, but to keep it short, it was a really nice talk and we want to take it slow. We also realized we'd basically been half dating since May, and it felt weird not to make it official. So I have a boyfriend now.